To send men to the moon, you need more than booster rockets. Among other things, Tracy Smith tells us, you need the skills of people working out of the spotlight, but uniquely suited to the job.
Right now, after seeing it happen, knowing that it happened, it still seems like a dream.
Even for the people who actually did it, the idea of walking on the moon is still a little hard to comprehend.
Anytime you felt a little bit homesick, you could just look up and see the Earth hanging over the South Massif. So it was really a spectacular place to be.
That's remarkable. Looking up and seeing the Earth.
Oh, it's only 250,000 miles away, so that's home.
In 1972, Harrison Jack Schmitt of Apollo 17 became the last man to set foot on the moon.
You're one of 12 people ever who stood on the moon. Can you get your head around that?
Well, not really. I was honored and privileged to be part of the Apollo program. But like everyone else who was part of the Apollo program, we happened to be at the right place at the right time with an extraordinarily strong motivation to succeed.
And here it looks as if they're about to come out.
And they were motivated. From the astronauts waving goodbye on their way to the history books to the chain-smoking guys in mission control. But back in places where the TV cameras didn't always go, a small army of women was working just as hard at jobs that were just as important. We all know this image of Buzz Aldrin in his spacesuit. But how that suit was made is a story in itself.
Let's let our friend Andy Astronaut demonstrate the hazards lunar explorers will encounter.
Before man could take a giant leap, they needed to solve a few giant problems.
In the near vacuum of space, the gases within his body would immediately expand.
Without the right spacesuit, an astronaut could blow up like a balloon, or burn up, or maybe get drilled by a micrometeorite. When NASA needed a new moon suit, big government contractors like Litton Industries and Hamilton Standard made stiff, bulky spacesuit prototypes that often looked like a cross between Sir Galahad and Buzz Lightyear.
To infinity and beyond!
What NASA needed was something more flexible, and they found out that no one knew flexible like the people who made these.
Pretty face, but uh-oh, midriff bulge. Her midriff bulge is showing. See the difference before and after you change to Playtex Living Long Line Bra.
Yep, Playtex, formerly known as the International Latex Corporation, ILC, of Dover, Delaware. The girdle company wasn't nearly as big as the other suit makers, but they had some pretty radical ideas. In 1967, ILC came up with a softer, more flexible spacesuit made almost entirely of fabric, and then shot this film at a local high school with an employee putting the suit through its paces. In the end, the company won the contract for the Apollo suits and gave some of their bra-making seamstresses a brand new assignment.
Did they tell you initially you're going to be sewing spacesuits?
They didn't tell me a thing. They just brought me over here.
So from bras and girdles to spacesuits.
Little pieces like this, to big pieces like this.
Anna Lee Minner, Ruth Anna Ratledge, Lily Elliott, and Joanne Thompson were four of the women who made the suits that went to the moon. Women, it turns out, had the perfect touch, according to ILC project manager Homer Ream.
The people that sewed the suits were all women.
Is that because?
Agility.
And it took plenty of agility. Each suit was 21 layers of gossamer thin fabric, sewn to a precise tolerance of 1/64th of an inch on a sewing machine your grandmother might have used.
So our sewing shop didn't go like commercial sewing shops. It went kaloop, 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 because we were interested in accuracy.
In other words, there was no room for any mistakes.
I went home on many a night and cried because I knew I couldn't do it.
Why'd you think that?
Because I was scared.
Scared of?
I was scared. This was a person's life this depended on.
In fact, they never forgot that their work could be the difference between victory and tragedy.
They took this job very seriously.
They did. I mean, they may have had the most important job of all, frankly.
Basil Hero is the author of The Mission of a Lifetime.
As Neil Armstrong said, those spacesuits were mini spacecraft. You were one pinprick away from death. If those suits failed, that was it. You were done.
So the women put their hearts into it. Lily Elliott cut the patterns.
As you were sewing, did you have in your minds where this was going, the responsibility of that?
I think right at the first, no. But later on, you know, when you had all these inspections going on, it kind of clicked in your head, okay, you know, I got to do this right.
This is a CBS News special report.
And then the job got even tougher.
America's first 3 Apollo astronauts were trapped and killed by a flash fire that swept their moonship early tonight at Cape Kennedy in Florida.
It had happened during a test, when a spark in the capsule's pure oxygen atmosphere triggered an inferno from which there was no escape.
This is a time for great sadness, national sadness, but it's also a time for courage. And if that sounds trite, I'll change the words to guts.
In the months that followed, NASA engineers put their grief aside and made the spacecraft safer. ILC also revamped the suits to take out anything that could burn. And the inspections there could be brutal. If one of the women left so much as a stray pin in the finished suit, there'd be hell to pay.
So if you had a pin in your spacesuit, what happened?
You got stuck with it.
I guess you learned your lesson that way.
Thank God it wasn't me.
The astronauts themselves were familiar faces as their suits were made, both in person for fittings and on the signed face cards that hung from every suit, a reminder that the astronauts were, indeed, betting their lives on the skilled hands at ILC.
We would have astronauts come in and thank us, and that was a real boost. It made a connection there that you didn't forget.
And we're getting a picture on the TV.
And on July 20th, 1969, when the big moment finally arrived, the women of International Latex held their breath.
Once they started down the ladder and he put his foot on the moon, that was a pinnacle of watching something that you've helped do.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Where was your heart in that moment?
In my throat.
And I'm curious, was there an inner dialogue going on, a voice in your head?
Oh my, I wonder if that's going to hold. Oh my, I wonder if this is going to be all right. I hope that stitch didn't pop.
Look at that.
Watching from Mission Control, Homer Ream just wanted it to be over, especially when Buzz Aldrin turned a moon walk into a moon sprint.
We're beginning to get pretty frisky up there.
I'm saying to myself, corral that guy, lock him up and get him up the ladder. It's a success. Let's declare it a success and go inside.
You wanted Buzz Aldrin to stop running.
I wanted Buzz Aldrin to stop running around and get up the ladder.
So-called kangaroo hop.
In fact, none of the spacesuits failed. Not once on the first moon mission or the last.
Right away, Houston. I was strolling on the moon one day in a merry, merry month of December. Now, May.
If you really listen to all of the audio of the mission, every once in a while you'll hear a song.
You lapse into song. I think that's pretty cool.
I was having a great time.
Were you able to enjoy yourself?
I really did. The whole time I was up there.
Oh, is this a neat way to travel? Isn't it great?
She knows everything about you.
Jack Schmidt turned 84 this month, and he still loves sharing his lunar experience.
I'd like to crawl back in there, but it doesn't look like they want me to.
And some of the ladies who sewed his suit would like back in, too.
We enjoyed every bit of it, every stitch. I would do it all over again if I could.
You'd still like to be doing it.
Yes, I love it.
Well, I'm still amazed, but it was great.
They're all retired now, but ILC is still making spacesuits. And who knows, an ILC suit might one day go to Mars. But it all began with Apollo 11, when a small group of dedicated women back on Earth helped bring us all just a little closer to the heavens.
I think they're taking pictures of each other with a Hasselblad camera. The first tourists on the moon.
David Pogue now takes us dining with the stars.
Eating in space is trickier than it looks.
You have to be careful. Every time you open any container in space, everything tends to want to fly out.
You eat straight out of the envelope?
Yeah, you'll open your envelope up, and then you take your spoon and just eat. Clean off your spoon with a wet wipe at the end of it, and then it's ready for the next meal.
Frank Rubio recently spent 371 consecutive days on the space station, a NASA record.
The thing that I missed the most was just fresh food. You just never have fresh fruit, fresh vegetables, a salad.
So it's not, I think a little more salt, it's not that.
Right. Food science is very different from being a chef.
At the Johnson Space Food Systems Laboratory in Houston, NASA food scientist Grace Douglas and food manager Shulei Wu have helped to develop a menu of 200 different dishes for space station dining.
What we're doing is looking at engineering and microbiology and chemistry and how we can make those foods stable for long amounts of time. So we have to make sure that they're safe and they taste really good for those lengths of time.
The space station has no traditional oven, stove, fridge, or freezer, only a little pouch warmer.
So this is a mango salad.
Wow, excellent, with a subtle bouquet of recirculated air.
To ensure a 3-year shelf life, every pouch has either been freeze-dried, heat-stabilized, or irradiated.
We're in Texas, so we had to try this barbecue beef brisket, and this is a irradiated product.
Also excellent. I can barely taste the gamma rays.
Even the rehydrated turkey was delicious.
Just like Mom used to make. And so there we go. Curried pumpkin soup, squash, turkey, spicy green beans, mango salad, cherry blueberry cobbler, your classic Norman Rockwell Thanksgiving dinner.
A Mars mission, though, will be a bigger challenge. It might require 5 years' worth of food, too heavy to launch with the astronauts.
Does anyone ever talk about, a pill or an energy drink that has all the nutrients you need in it?
Well, this goes back to variety because if we think about food on Earth, we celebrate around food. It becomes very important. There's concepts out there of, well, we can produce a lot of algae or something else. You worked really hard all day and you're really tired and you come home, and what would you want to eat with your friends?
You're saying probably not an algae pill.
Probably not.
As for astronaut Frank Rubio, it was time to ask the big question.
Globules of water floating in microgravity and going after. Is that just a stunt for the camera that gets old after a day?
Yeah, almost every meal, you'll have somebody be like, hey, Woody, or hey, Steve, catch, right? Playing with your food is one of the small privileges that we have while we're up there.
We're just days away from what may become the deepest look into our ghosts of Christmas past and beyond. We might even glimpse the very origins of our universe. David Pogue gives us a sneak peek.
The Hubble Space Telescope, our window on the universe.
In 1990, NASA launched the Hubble Space Telescope. It had faced years of delays and cost overruns, but it proved the existence of black holes, calculated the age of the universe, and delivered astonishing views of deep space. But now, NASA has something 100 times more powerful, capable of seeing stars so distant, their light has been traveling for nearly 14 billion years, since just after the Big Bang. It's the biggest, most ambitious space observatory ever built, the James Webb Space Telescope, and it's scheduled to lift off in 10 days.
It's got 7 times the collecting area, a mirror, which collects more light, right, to see things that are either dimmer or further away.
Scott Willoughby is the Webb's program manager. He works for Northrop Grumman, which NASA hired to do most of the design and construction. The Webb will see a different kind of light than the Hubble did. The light from very distant, very old stars is infrared light.
So we're designing an eye like night vision goggles for the sky where we're going to find infrared out in the universe.
So this is the telescope.
Yeah, teeny one.
Not actual size.
The main mirror is made up of 18 hexagons.
Every one of these mirrors has a motor, so we can move them, in and out, and we can adjust them. So in the end, they all look like one mirror segment to the universe.
Was it made golden for looks?
It was not. It's a great question. For Webb, gold reflects infrared. The light goes from here to here to here. It goes in there. It bounces off of other mirrors. And then all instruments can see that light.
Now, infrared is a form of heat. So any warmth from the sun and the earth would blind this telescope to distant starlight. The telescope can work only if it's super cold, like space itself.
So we have to block out any shred of that sun by deploying a big sun shield.
It has 5 layers of a material like mylar, each one the thickness of a human hair.
So all of this is to just separate the whole thing into a cold side from the hot side?
Correct. Okay. That cold side, minus 400 degrees Fahrenheit. The hot side, about plus 200 degrees Fahrenheit. Sunlight will never touch these mirrors as they get on orbit.
There's another way to keep a telescope cold, too.
We send it 4 times further away than the moon. We're 1 million miles away. And with that, we can keep our optics colder.
But you haven't even heard the hardest part. This telescope is 3 stories tall and as wide as a tennis court, too big to fit into any existing rocket. NASA's solution? Fold it up, like origami.
So this folds along here and along here. Those 3 fold back, and those 3 fold back.
They fold?
Yeah, so like ears. So this wing will deploy, this wing, and this is actually stowed up and over.
I have to say, this is the part that worries me as a layperson. I mean, how complex is this unfolding process?
It's good to be worried. They have things that are called single point failures, right? This has to move this way, and there's only one of them. And Webb has over 300 of those.
300 things that have to go exactly right?
Correct, yeah.
If even one of them fails, the Webb telescope becomes the Webb space junk. 1 million miles is much too far away to send a repair mission, as we did for the Hubble.
So what do you do with those? You test them to greater extremes than they'll ever see. If it's got to be this cold and this warm, we test it this cold and this warm. If it's going to be shaken like this, we shake it like this, right?
All that additional testing and caution helps explain the telescope's 14 years of delays and its $9.7 billion price tag.
Every time we learn something, we had to repeat a series of tests. But all of that is because we have to learn on the ground.
So at this point, days away from the launch, how confident are you?
Confidence is built, to me, out of did we do everything that we could possibly have done? I can confidently say we did everything that we needed to do. We took every piece of it, and we did the best we absolutely possibly could.
If all goes well, then by the summer of 2022, this machine will get down to its work, science.
JWST is going to rewrite the textbooks, and I think the science that's going to come out of this is mind-blowing.
NASA's Stephanie Milam is one of the telescope's science officers.
We're going to see the first stars and galaxies and understand how the evolution of our universe actually started. We're going to be able to study the atmospheres of planets around other stars that we've never had access to.
Most exciting of all, Milam expects the Webb telescope to discover things we never even thought to look for, as the Hubble has done many times.
There are going to be things that we aren't prepared for, and we'll have to figure out how to use the telescope in different ways and plan for the unexpected.
After the scheduled launch on December 22nd, Scott Willoughby will have to wait 29 days to find out if the unfolding worked, and then 5 months more for the telescope to calibrate and cool down.
So in the end, it takes us a half a year before you'll be reporting on some image that humankind has never seen before in our lives.
And is that the point where you can finally sleep at night?
Yeah, I'll feel a lot better then.
I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal
Remember this?
Of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth.
Seagull is at Tranquility, over.
It was a time when dreams about spaceflight came true.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
And it was a giant leap for mankind. But since then, it seems like we've taken a step back.
The space shuttle spreads its wings one final time.
And in 2011, when the space shuttle stopped flying,
Atlantis glided into history today.
A lot of people kind of forgot about NASA.
This is Mission Control Houston, 1 hour 5 minutes into today's spacewalk.
But NASA's still here. And 5 days from now, it will launch one of its most ambitious missions yet, sending 51-year-old astronaut Scott Kelly to the International Space Station for 12 months. That's twice as long as his last trip to space in 2010.
Hi, my name is Scott Kelly, and I'm an astronaut.
And a new record for an American astronaut.
Last time I felt like I was kind of taking a long business trip. This time it's more like I feel like I'm just moving and I'm not coming back.
Without the space shuttle, Kelly has only one way to get into space, aboard this Russian spacecraft called the Soyuz. He'll take off from the world's oldest space launch facility, the Baikonur Cosmodrome in southern Kazakhstan.
I'll be in here with 2 cosmonauts.
He'll be traveling with Russians Mikhail Kornienko and Gennady Padalka. And in case you're wondering, Kelly says political tensions between the countries are left on Earth, as the men embark on a cramped 6-hour journey to the space station.
It's no minivan in there, I'll tell you that.
It's not very big.
Kelly showed us a replica of the spacecraft at NASA's Johnson Space Center in Houston.
I'll be playing the role of commander at this
Yeah,
performance.
you are the Soyuz commander.
I gotta ask you, it doesn't look like cutting-edge technology. It looks like 60s technology.
Some of it is. The good news is it works, most of the time. They've had a couple accidents, but, so did we on the space shuttle. Risky, but, flying in space is risky.
If Scott Kelly looks familiar, well, it might be because he has a famous twin brother, Mark Kelly. Mark is a retired astronaut himself and husband of former Congresswoman Gabby Giffords.
I'd be lying if I didn't tell you that I wish I was blasted off in a rocket in a couple months.
He won't be on the space station, but Mark is part of the mission as an identical control subject on the ground. By comparing the twins' biology over the year, scientists hope to learn more about what happens to you after a long time in space, like bone loss and muscle loss, important groundwork for an eventual mission to Mars. But physical changes are only part of the story. There's also the mental challenge of living in a 6-room box in space for a year.
What would happen if you started getting signs that he's starting to crack?
Well, we don't expect to see signs that he's starting to crack. First of all, we've done a selection due diligence.
Al Holland is a NASA psychologist. His team will be in constant contact with Kelly.
So people that are coming in, we already have a certain amount of confidence that in a prior life they have done things that are stressful. They've endured deployments or they've endured other long separations effectively.
Scott Kelly certainly has endured stress in space before. For example, during his 6-month stay on the space station.
It was a Saturday, January 8th, 2011. We got a call, for me, the chief of the astronaut office wants to talk to you on a private space-to-ground channel in 5 minutes. And she said, I don't know how to tell you this, so I'm just going to tell you your sister-in-law was shot in the head at a public event in Tucson, Arizona, and we don't have much other information.
Eventually, Gabby recovered, and Scott got to see her 2 months later at home. But very soon, home will once again be the space station.
Sleeping is done on the wall here in a sleeping bag.
That's your bedroom right there,
That's the bedroom.
Lavish.
Yeah. You'll have a couple computers in there, some personal items. Actually, in space, it's quite comfortable.
At the Johnson Space Center, NASA has also built a mock-up of the space station, which they use for training.
On behalf of science classes all over America, I have to ask you about going to the bathroom. How do you go to the bathroom?
Very carefully.
He'll be here till Thursday, folks. Oh, there she is.
That's it. That's what everyone always wants to see.
Our tax dollars at work.
You know, it uses air suction. It's got this, you know, this funnel, and you turn it on, and it vacuum comes up, and you do your thing.
And talk about advanced technology. When you're finished, a special distiller recycles your urine back into drinking water.
You know, for the other thing.
I haven't seen any laundry facilities.
We don't have any, nor do we have a shower, so we throw away the clothes and we take a little sponge bath.
You throw away the clothes?
Mm-hmm.
Here's the kind of space clothing he won't be throwing away. Spacesuits for spacewalks.
My safety tether config is good.
We have a long safety tether that is always connected.
Enjoy your last walk.
So you don't jet around like George Clooney?
Referring to George Clooney and Gravity, I don't think we do anything like George Clooney did.
Mind if I join the fun?
Including the sense of humor. You've fallen off the space station, that's a bad day.
On a good day in space, you follow a routine. You work out, and you eat.
So cubes and tubes. This is the original space food, Mercury and Gemini. So basically what they had was baby food in a tube that they squeezed in their mouth.
Oh, man.
And then they had a lot of different varieties of dried cubes.
Space station cuisine today looks more like a TV dinner.
One of our most popular items has been our shrimp cocktail.
According to food manager Vicki Claris, the astronauts eat entrees like spaghetti and meat sauce,
Like Mom used to make.
Yeah.
sweet and sour chicken,
Right, the flavor is there. It's just the texture is a little off.
This is crawfish etouffee.
Cool.
and even the occasional Cajun specialty.
It's not gourmet, but considering everything, it's pretty good.
Yeah.
This is beef tips with mushroom.
Claris's team has developed a menu of 200 space foods. Before each launch, the astronauts get to choose their favorites. From his food, to his fitness, to his health, every detail of Kelly's life in space is managed by his team on Earth. But the most important person on the ground might be his longtime girlfriend, Amiko Cowderer.
He calls me a slow cooker.
Well, he's used to opening a pouch.
Who works in NASA's Public Affairs Office. These two are about to give new meaning to the term long-distance relationship.
Most of my concerns with this flight and being gone for years, the stuff that can happen to people on Earth while I'm gone.
Kelly, who has 2 daughters from a previous marriage, will be able to call his family by phone whenever he wants. They can have video chats with him once a week.
I can't imagine that it would be easy for any woman.
It's not easy at all. But I think we're both of the mindset of we kind of really appreciate challenge and things that are hard because we also know at the end of it that you can kind of go, yeah, we did that.
And the homecoming's really good after a year.
A year in space to prepare for a mission to Mars. For NASA, those are giant leaps indeed.
Space junk, debris, large and small, spinning uncontrollably in an increasingly cluttered universe. It's a lot more than unsightly, it's dangerous. David Pogue reports on a collision course in the skies.
If you're going to be a character in a space movie,
Harvey, keep your eyes shut and exhale slowly.
you gotta watch out for space junk. Everyone knows that. It seems to happen a lot.
Debris from the missile strike has caused a chain reaction, hitting other satellites and creating new debris.
But what not everyone knows is that that plot twist isn't fiction anymore.
I got a call from my chief satellite officer. He said, we've lost track of our satellite vehicle, number 33, somewhere over Siberia. It may have been hit by something.
You didn't build this just for us?
Matt Desch is the CEO of Iridium, whose 66 satellites provide voice and data connections for governments, companies, air traffic, and shipping. In 2009, a defunct Russian satellite crashed into one of Iridium's.
So how bad was the damage?
Well, it completely took out our satellite.
The Iridium disaster was a wake-up call for the space industry.
There's estimated to be like 130 million tiny pieces smaller than the size of your thumb out there. And at 17,000 miles an hour, they can do damage.
The litter in low Earth orbit has become a constant danger to the International Space Station. In May, astronauts there discovered a hole in the station's giant robotic arm. Fortunately, the arm still works, but it was a lucky strike. This time,
the Air Force, the Space Force, are constantly monitoring the debris in low Earth orbit.
I spoke to astronauts Victor Glover and Mike Hopkins in April while they were aboard the space station.
Sometimes we have to move the station, sometimes we don't. So it is a constant, something that we're always worrying about up here and something that we have to be mindful of.
And if there's no time to move the space station?
Then you have to take shelter. Get in basically your rescue vehicle and be prepared to depart the station.
Peggy Whitson has spent more time in space than any American.
My second flight, I think we had to do one debris avoidance maneuver, and we did 3 or 4 on my last one. There's a greatly increasing number of objects out there.
There was an old saying that space is big. Not anymore. It's getting smaller and smaller by the day.
John Chryssidis is a professor at the University at Buffalo who specializes in space debris. Like many experts, he's worried about the Kessler syndrome.
In 1978, Donald Kessler was an engineer at NASA, and he predicted that debris would hit other debris, which would cause more debris. I think in 50 years, if we don't do something, probably the collision is going to be so great that it's not even worth putting satellites up there. We definitely don't want to do that.
So what are the proposals for cleaning up our act up there?
There are many proposals right now. Unfortunately, none of them are feasible.
But that doesn't mean people aren't trying. In 2018, an experimental European satellite called the Remove Debris successfully ensnared a fake piece of debris in a net. And a startup called Astroscale has devised several approaches to cleaning up space junk.
None of us think that this is going to be easy, but we all know it has to be done.
Chris Blackerby is Astroscale's chief operating officer. In March, the company launched a satellite called ELSA-D that's designed to capture any piece of space junk that was fitted with a special magnetic plate. This summer, it will try to grab a fake dead satellite.
There's an arm that's going to extend out that has magnets on the end of it, and it's going to go and attach to that satellite.
But even if you can get all the technology to work, and even if you can figure out a way to pay for it, how much of the problem can Astroscale really fix?
We're never going to remove every piece of debris, but we think that we can put a significant reduction on the risk of future operations in orbit by taking these steps.
Iridium's Matt Desch isn't convinced by those efforts.
Technology can help, unfortunately can't help soon, and it can't help in a big way. There's really no business case for that in the near term to make a big dent into space.
Meanwhile, our primary satellite traffic lanes are about to get a lot more crowded. Companies like Elon Musk's Starlink are in the process of launching mega constellations, thousands of tiny satellites designed to provide internet service all over the world.
Many other governments in the world have plans to create their own mega constellations, and there aren't rules of the road for all of us to work together effectively. I mean, there's not even the simplest thing of ensuring that people don't fly at the same altitude. You're just asking for problems.
Well, if you could wave your magic wand and solve the problem, what would the pieces of that solution look like?
We think the most important thing is don't create any more while we're still trying to figure out a technical solution for it. So if you have a problem with a satellite, don't launch another one. Another thing that's really important is that there has to be a lot more cooperation and coordination between everyone who is in space. Everybody has to communicate the information. You can imagine perhaps the Russians and Chinese have a problem coordinating, giving all the information about their satellite locations to the U.S. Air Force.
In a way, this is sort of an age-old human story, whether it's us dumping plastic or us dumping chemicals or us burning fossil fuels. We don't really think through the detritus that we leave behind.
You're right. I mean, it's so-called tragedy of the commons. Low Earth orbit is a global resource that we all have to protect for the future because we don't get another one.
Although the moon seems ever so familiar, we're really barely acquainted. Only a few souls have ever ventured there and back, and of those who have, few are left. Bill Anders, though, is one of them.
I'm Bill.
I'm Lee.
Hey, Lee, good.
So nice to meet you. Still flying high at age 85.
Well, I figure I'd keep flying as long as I can crawl in them.
To look an Apollo astronaut in the eye, it's hard not to imagine what those eyes have seen. Anders especially. 50 years ago this week, on Christmas Eve, no less, he and the crew of Apollo 8 saw our home as no human ever had, like a holiday ornament hanging over the moon.
It was ironic that we'd done all this work to come and explore the moon, and what we really discovered was the Earth.
The year was 1968. Little seemed right with the world that Christmas. War, riots, assassinations. The mood was hardly festive, says the author of a recent book on Apollo 8, Jeffrey Kluger.
This was a year of sorrow, of suffering, and of massive bloodshed. And then at the end of the year, we had this moment to do this magnificent thing. It was serendipity saying, humanity, you guys deserve a break. Make the most of it.
The launch was set for just 4 days before Christmas. The command module that sat high atop the most powerful machine man had ever built looked tiny then and still does, where it sits at the Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago. Jim Lovell sat in the middle seat.
I suddenly found myself 360 feet high, and I looked down below, and there was the news media people coming in to park their cars. It was still dark. And I thought to myself, they're sending me to the moon.
The engines are on. 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
My biggest remembrance about Saturn V was the noise.
Oh, and there's the rumble in our building.
There's no way that you could simulate or train for the noise that beast put out.
This building is shaking under us. You're looking good.
Apollo 8's commander, Frank Borman, knew this would be a mission full of firsts.
Man is farther away from home than he's ever been before, 100 times farther away.
If everything went right, mankind would never be the same. But to Borman, only one first really mattered.
What I wanted to do was go to the moon and come back alive, because I knew that would beat the Russians.
We're looking forward now, of course, till the day after tomorrow when we'll be just 60 miles away from the moon. Happy birthday, Mother.
So everyone, Russians included, was glued to their black and white TVs.
What do you have today, Bill, for dinner?
Although it seemed like we were right there with them,
Chicken and gravy?
Apollo 8 was really very much alone.
I could put my thumb up to the window and completely hide the Earth. Now you have to think about that. Over 5 billion people. Everything I ever knew was behind my thumb.
Did you guys say anything to each other? I mean, this was the first time mankind had ever left the Earth's pole.
I think that was the least of our worries.
I guess that's true.
After all, they weren't just going to the moon, they were going to orbit it 10 times. But then, it actually happened.
Welcome from the moon, Houston.
On Christmas Eve, that lonely, barren place got some human tidings of great joy.
We're like 3 school kids looking into a candy store window, watching those ancient old craters on the far side slowly slip underneath us.
But describing what they saw proved almost as hard as getting there.
Do you remember what you said?
Well, I said that it looked like dirty beach sand.
A very whitish gray, like dirty beach sand.
That's how I described it, thus gaining the wrath of poets worldwide. Could he have done better? Probably.
They really didn't need words in the end. As it turned out, a single photo would do most of the talking.
Oh my God, look at that picture over there. Wow, is that pretty?
Problem was, they had precious little film on board, and what they had was supposed to be used to take pictures of the moon, not the Earth.
Hey, don't take that, it's not scheduled.
But Anders did it anyway.
That wasn't in the flight plan. He was right. Hell with that, you know. And here was a beautiful shot.
Hand me a roll of color quick, oh, will you? Man, that's great.
Known as Earthrise, it became one of the most reproduced images ever, in part because no other photograph summed up our place in the universe, our small place at that, quite like this.
This was just a beacon of hope as well as awe. It pointed the way toward a new understanding of who we are as human beings.
Even for a brief moment.
Even for a brief moment.
For environmental crusader Al Gore, that image was proof of just how fragile our world is. It's the spirit behind the climate change exhibit at the American Museum of Natural History in New York. And it's the centerpiece to almost every climate presentation the former vice president has ever given.
Is it fair to say that that one image was one of the biggest catalysts for the environmental movement?
Oh, no question about it. Within a year and a half, the first Earth Day was organized. The momentum emerged in the Congress for the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act. It transformed the environmental movement into what it became in the immediate aftermath of that image.
It alone may have been enough to secure Apollo 8's place in the conscience of humanity. But it wasn't the final word on that Christmas Eve night.
The crew of Apollo 8 has a message that we would like to send to you.
Do you have any idea, though, how many people would be listening in and watching?
Well, we were told that we would have the largest audience that ever listened to a human voice before.
But what to say? What words would resonate through the heavens on one of the holiest nights of the year? They settled on ones that already had, from the book of Genesis.
In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep.
It was pitch perfect. They were the words of three, in some ways, very ordinary humans. I always say they had very lunch bucket names, Frank and Bill and Jim. What could be more human than that?
And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night.
Did you know at the time what kind of impact that would have?
No, but as we flew and as we contemplated it afterwards, we all agreed that we couldn't have done anything more appropriate.
So they're on the way home. 3 explorers named Borman, Lovell, and Anders, whose names are going down in the history books as surely as did Magellan and Vasco da Gama and Columbus.
They were indeed sailors on a new ocean, returning from a successful voyage at the end of one of our most turbulent years during a season all about peace.
We got thousands of telegrams after the flight, but the one that struck me the most, thank you, Apollo 8, you saved 1968. And I think in the way we helped to heal it.
Good night, good luck, a Merry Christmas, and God bless all of you on the good earth.
It's the out-of-this-world destination that's out of reach for most of us, though not for the pair our David Pogue has been chatting with.
5.
Last November, Mike Hopkins and Victor Glover took a trip to an amazing travel destination. It was 250 miles away, straight up.
And resilience rises.
27 hours later,
Soft capture confirmed.
their SpaceX capsule docked
Hard capture complete.
at the International Space Station.
We are looking forward to the next 6 months and can't wait to get started.
As Mike and Victor, who also goes by Ike, near the end of their mission, NASA offered me a space nerd's dream come true, a live video chat with Mike and Ike in space.
This is Mission Control Houston. Please call station.
Station, this is David Pogue with CBS Sunday Morning.
David, we hear you loud and clear.
You indicated that there's really no up or down. So is there any reason that one of you couldn't turn head down? The blood's not rushing to your head, Victor?
Not at all. Not at all. In fact, it doesn't seem weird to me until I look at Hopper and go, why is Hopper upside down?
Ike demonstrated how to get around.
He just pushes off with his hands, and there he goes.
The space station isn't quite as futuristic looking as movie spaceships.
We're now going to go from the front end of the space station all the way to the back end.
The space station is about the length of a football field. The US, Russia, Canada, Europe, and Japan began building it in 1998, and they've never really stopped. The bedrooms aren't much bigger than phone booths.
We have them on the sides, but we also have them on the ceiling, and we have them on the deck.
It's just a bag to keep you in place and a couple of laptops. Each astronaut spends 2 hours a day working out. There's a weight machine with vacuum tubes instead of weights, a treadmill with bungee cords, and an exercise bike.
Because we're in space, we don't need to sit down when we use this bike, so there's no seat.
There's a reason for all that exercise. Zero-gravity life does a real number on your body. Are there any long-term effects that don't return once you've been on Earth for a while?
There can be, absolutely. It is hard to prevent having some bone loss, but after my last mission, I lost about 2.5% bone density, and it took years for that to kind of come back.
Mike and Ike have also mastered the finer points of dining in space.
So I get a little bit of peanut butter.
Most of the food comes ready to eat.
Well, maybe a lot of peanut butter.
But not all of it.
I can let go of my cracker, and it's going to stay in the general location. And so now I'm tearing open my jelly packet, and voila, I now have a cracker, a peanut butter and jelly cracker.
And because your inner second grader probably wants to know,
A couple things about our toilet. You can see there is a can here, and this can, that's where the solid waste is collected. And then the urine is collected in this hose. Because we collect urine separately, we're able to recycle that urine.
yes, the astronauts recycle their pee. In space, water is a precious resource.
The station's recently celebrated 20 years of being continuously occupied. What do you miss most while you're up there?
I miss my family, and I just can't wait to see my kids at the airport or wherever I bump into them first.
I will also tell you one of the things I miss the most, weather. Up here, it never changes. It is always 70 degrees, and there's no wind, there's no rain, there's no snow.
No humidity?
No humidity. I mean, it's just constantly the same.
Hearing Hopper say rain reminded me I miss the shower.
On the other hand, former astronaut Peggy Whitson sometimes misses space.
After my first flight, I returned to Earth and I was laying on the bed and threw the covers off and just did the lightest push on the bed and expected to float to the bathroom. and I was like, oh my, it's going to take a lot more work to get there than that.
She spent more time up there than any other American, much of it as the commander of the space station.
What's the grand total number of days you were in space?
665 days.
That's the equivalent of a flight to Mars, is that right?
Yes, you could get to Mars and back in 665 days. So I'm proof it's doable.
20 years of space station science have yielded hundreds of breakthroughs in fields like weather, astronomy, biology, materials, and especially medicine, Alzheimer's, cancer, heart disease, and so on.
The salmonella that gives you food poisoning, it actually became more virulent in space, and then they were able to actually develop a vaccine for that.
Worms, mice, and rats are often on board too to help NASA study the long-term effects of zero gravity. They seem to like it just fine.
Understanding the physics of how things work without gravity, we sometimes figure out ways to better understand how things work in gravity.
But for the humans on board, seeing our home from space is always spectacular.
You look out the window and you see planet Earth, and you look at it and you see how thin this atmosphere is and how delicate it looks. If you happen to be near a window and you're flying over the Sahara Desert, the whole room will get this golden glow, this peachy, orangey glow.
The best views on the station are from what's called the cupola.
The cupola is the window that faces down at the Earth, and it is a pretty incredible view, and it really never does get old.
Talking to astronauts never gets old either. But eventually, it was time for Colonel Hopkins and Commander Glover to get back to their mission.
Thank you, Mike and Ike. This is the greatest. And thanks for all you do.
Station, this is Houston ACR. That concludes the event. Thank you.
NASA scientists last week reportedly received evidence from the Curiosity rover of a surprisingly high level of methane on the red planet Mars, possibly a sign of life. Yet another reason why so many Earthlings are dreaming of traveling to Mars and seeing red for themselves. Our cover story is reported by David Pogue.
We've always been intrigued by Mars. We've composed music about it. We've made paintings of it. And we've made so many movies about it. Yes! Yes! But what no person has ever done before is go there.
Mars in the public zeitgeist is very hot right now. We're closer to putting footprints on the surface of Mars today than we've ever been in the past.
Adam Stelzner is the chief engineer for a new unmanned NASA mission to Mars launching next year called Mars 2020.
So Mars is smaller than Earth. It's colder. It has a very thin atmosphere, so you couldn't breathe it. And so it's a very inhospitable environment.
Of course, this isn't NASA's first mission to Mars. We put the Viking lander on Mars in 1976, the Sojourner rover in 1997, twin rovers, Spirit and Opportunity, in 2003, and in 2012, Adam Stelzner's last big project, the Curiosity rover. It's still exploring Mars today.
Curiosity told us that the ancient, wet environment of Mars was, in fact, habitable for life. Still, the question hangs tantalizingly unanswered in front of us if it was alive. And our mission, Mars 2020, is sort of here to hopefully untangle that question and provide an answer.
The star of Mars 2020 is this rover. Its cameras, lasers, and sensors will analyze the surface of Mars, looking for signs of ancient life. And it will put rock samples into airtight canisters for a later mission to bring back to Earth. This rover will also be carrying a stowaway, a fellow robot that will detach once the rover is safely on Mars.
The mid part is the rotor system with a pair of counter-rotating blades.
That's right. NASA has built a Mars helicopter. NASA's Mimi Ong.
This particular helicopter is designed now to fly up to 90 seconds. And
90 seconds? $23 million for a drone that can fly 90 seconds? It doesn't sound like very much.
Look, this is the first time ever that we're flying on another planet.
Meanwhile, at NASA headquarters in Washington, D.C., plans are afoot to send an even more delicate cargo to Mars.
Has NASA thought about an overall timeline of putting a man on Mars, person on Mars?
We're thinking maybe the mid-2030s as a timeline, just visionary.
Jim Bridenstine is the NASA administrator, the top dog. A key element of his Mars plan is creating a sort of rehearsal stage on the moon.
The moon can be a great proving ground for our first mission to Mars. If something doesn't go right, there's still an opportunity to get home.
Is part of the Mars push to literally create a planet B? You know, are people thinking that science fiction-y?
I'm not ruling it out, but it's not my objective right now.
So the main objective is?
We want to discover life.
But not everyone thinks that way. Some people argue that we need another option in case we make the Earth uninhabitable.
You want a backup planet. You want a backup strategy. Maybe a couple of backup strategies. The moon could be one, Mars could be one.
Gwynne Shotwell is the president and chief operating officer of SpaceX, whose business is launching cargo, satellites, and soon people into space for its customers, governments, communications companies, and NASA. Her boss is Tesla billionaire Elon Musk.
It's important that we try to become a multi-planet civilization, extend life beyond Earth.
Unlike NASA, SpaceX reuses its rockets instead of just letting them burn up. It's astonishing to see them return to the pad and land perfectly on their tails, by themselves. Still, SpaceX and NASA need each other.
I want to be clear, we are working with NASA.
So you're not competitors?
Not competitors to NASA, no.
Oh,
They're
wow.
a customer as well as a partner.
But Shotwell does think that SpaceX will put people on Mars first.
We would love to be in a position to send a ship to Mars in 2022. Hopefully, if we did a good job in 2022, we would be able to send people in 2024.
2024 with people? Do people say you're crazy?
People have said we are crazy since we started.
This is the enormous rocket that SpaceX is building for Mars. It's called the Super Heavy. It's not quite as big as the Saturn booster, the biggest of all time, but SpaceX says it's 6 times as powerful. So why Mars now?
The characteristics of the planet were close enough to Earth that we could see a path to putting humans on Mars and having them survive. But it is a fixer-upper planet. Life is not going to be easy on Mars for the first few decades for sure.
We're in the middle of a lava flow, and this is the high seas habitat behind us. Hawaii Space Exploration Analog and Simulation.
Kim Binstead is a professor at the University of Hawaii and the mastermind behind this isolated habitat perched on the side of a Hawaiian volcano. It feels as much like Mars as you can find on Earth.
So this gives us a chance to run long-duration simulations of exploring the surface of Mars. So by long duration, I mean 4 to 12 months or even longer.
You mean people live in that dome for a year?
A year, yeah.
Wow, and can they call home?
Nope, they are under a 20-minute each-way communications delay. So that's to simulate the amount of time it takes for a signal to get from Earth to Mars. So that means no web surfing, no social media, no picking up the phone and calling anyone.
Can I try it on?
Yeah, sure.
Do you have it in a 40 long?
The high seas habitat can't simulate the hostile conditions on Mars, but it can simulate being cooped up with fellow astronauts during a months-long mission.
The main thing we're testing are the people. If the human part fails, it's just as catastrophic as if the rocket blows up.
Binstead says that the key is choosing the right kind of people.
It can be summarized as a thick skin, a long fuse, and an optimistic outlook. If you took people off the street and put them in this habitat, they would probably be at each other's throats within a day or two.
Probably because inside, it feels like a 1.5-story camping tent.
So this is a bedroom. As you can see, it's not very big.
No.
But you do have a bed.
It's about what you'd get on a cheap cruise ship.
Very cheap
or a
cruise
prison
ship.
sentence.
If you can imagine going on a family holiday in a camper van for a year, this is kind of the situation we're talking about here, and our crews have all emerged alive.
Now, space travel is massively expensive. So I had to ask NASA head Jim Bridenstine the big taxpayer question.
Why should we spend money on going to other planets when we have so many problems here at home?
I think that's a very short-sighted suggestion, and I'll tell you why. Space has transformed all of our lives. The way we communicate, the way we navigate, produce food, produce energy, the way we predict weather, the way we do disaster relief, provide national security and defense. And the only reason that all of these technologies are available to us that is because of the trail that NASA has blazed doing exploration.
Plus Tang.
Plus Tang, sure.
Tang, chosen for the Gemini astronauts. Have a blast. Have some Tang.
So here's where we stand. NASA is completing construction of its new Mars rover in readiness for its launch in July 2020. In Texas, SpaceX is firing prototypes of its Mars rocket engines twice a week, getting ready for short test flights in late 2020.
I think we'll get to Mars. I think we'll do it within the next decade, for sure.
And NASA's Adam Stelzner is looking forward to watching his baby lift off to Mars from a distance.
Would you ever want to go to Mars?
No.
Why not?
I have children and a beautiful garden, and this is a warm, wet kiss compared to the surface of Mars. I'd like to just hang out here.
It's something we haven't seen in a while. 2 American astronauts are scheduled to lift off from Kennedy Space Center this Wednesday. Mark Strassman has a preview.
9 years ago this July, American astronauts last left planet Earth from American soil.
All 3 engines up and burning. 2, 1, 0, and liftoff.
The final mission of the space shuttle era carried a special payload, a small American flag.
The crew is intending to leave that flag on board the International Space Station.
It's been a sentimental fixture floating above Earth ever since.
So it was a good way to just say, hey, the next time somebody flies something from the United States, this flag's going to be up here waiting for them.
But no one knew how and when. Astronaut Doug Hurley piloted that last shuttle flight.
Did you think then that the person who might bring that flag home could be you?
No, absolutely not. I mean, I didn't think I was going to fly again necessarily, let alone be potentially the guy that goes up and gets it.
Doug Hurley.
But it looks like he'll get that chance after all. On Wednesday, Hurley and astronaut Bob Behnken will make history when they blast off from Florida's Kennedy Space Center.
1. Ignition, liftoff.
They'll climb aboard a SpaceX rocket and launch into a new era of commercial human spaceflight.
I think the most exciting thing about this mission for both Doug and I is bringing that capability and inspiring hopefully another generation of engineers and scientists to challenge themselves and to try to do great things like our nation does.
When the shuttle retired in 2011,
the space shuttle pulls into port for the last time. Its voyage at an end.
NASA's astronauts had only one way to get to space.
And liftoff.
Hitching a ride on a Russian Soyuz rocket.
The partnership is strong, but we don't want dependency.
NASA Administrator Jim Bridenstine.
Some of this is American pride.
Prestige. I like to use the word prestige. Great nations should be able to launch their own astronauts into space.
So in 2014, NASA hired Boeing and Elon Musk's SpaceX to be their Uber and Lyft to the space station. For NASA, it's more cost-effective and allows the agency to focus on the science of exploring deep space. SpaceX beat out Boeing in being first to fly. Its design has a back-to-the-future feel and flashy new technology throughout.
It's been described as a flying iPhone. Is that fair?
I remember that comment.
Yeah, it's a pretty big iPhone, the 3 touch screens in front of you, so I at least give it credit to be an iPad, maybe more than an iPad.
SpaceX has a track record. They've already flown 19 missions bringing cargo to the space station. But this time, for the first time, the reusable rocket's capsule will carry people.
Do you have any reservations about flying for a company that has never actually put someone into space before?
I don't think reservations are the right word. I think what we really concern ourselves with as test pilot school graduates is, hey, what's the plan look like? Tell me the buildup that we're going to march through. Let's look at the details of that, and when all those things are done appropriately, we'll be ready to fly on it from a human perspective.
Does it mean something to you guys in this new age to be the first?
After you come back and it's successful, Bob and I can go hang out someplace and have a beer and maybe then we can reflect on, all those things. But it's you're just so hyper-focused on getting to that point and making it a success.
Landing the modern SpaceX capsule back on Earth will have a more retro approach, a splashdown, like the Apollo moonshots of the 1960s and 70s.
And it has potential then to really be a means for bridging differences and bringing people together.
Margaret Weidekamp is a space historian at the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum. She hopes this new era of exploration may help unite our polarized country, just as Apollo 11 did at the height of Vietnam.
There is always something that stirs the heart in a different way when you know that you are watching something through the eyes of a fellow human being. I think it puts us sitting in their seat. We imagine ourselves looking through their eyes.
And after months of COVID misery and fatigue, experiencing that feeling of wonder, riding the rocket along with Behnken and Hurley. After years of training, the astronauts arrived at Kennedy Space Center on Wednesday. They were greeted by a mask-wearing Jim Bridenstine, something that in all the years of preparation, no one could have ever predicted.
I think right now, in the midst of this pandemic, where people are struggling with maybe even just simple motivation, maybe people are concerned about the future, what NASA is so amazing at doing is bringing people together and inspiring them for a future that is brighter than today.
Once upon a time, 3 wise men looked to the heavens and saw a guiding star. Millennia have passed, but as David Pogue will show us, we're still looking skyward, aided by a wondrous tool.
The story of Christmas features a miraculous astronomical sight.
Yes, it was the Star of Bethlehem which shone so brightly.
But this Christmas, we're blessed with an abundance of new visions from the skies. Jupiter and its rings, 385 million miles away. The Carina Nebula, 7,500 light years away. The Phantom Galaxy, 32 million light years away. And the deepest regions of space, 13 billion light years away. These pictures come from the James Webb Space Telescope, which lifted off on Christmas Day 2 years ago.
As liftoff, James Webb begins a voyage back to the birth of the universe.
In 1989, NASA began thinking about a successor to the Hubble telescope. The new machine would have massive gold-plated lenses that could detect infrared light, invisible to our eyes, but capable of passing through dust and gases from 100 times farther into the universe. The Webb would also be much bigger than the Hubble, 3 stories tall and 70 feet wide. Too big to fit into any existing rocket. NASA's solution? Fold it up.
How complex is this unfolding process?
They have things that are called single point failures, right? This has to move this way, and there's only one of them. And Webb has over 300 of those. The light goes from here to here to here.
Scott Willoughby oversaw the Webb's construction at Northrop Grumman. We first met 10 days before the launch.
300 things that have to go exactly right?
Correct, yeah.
So now, on the 2nd anniversary of the launch, we can finally ask,
so how'd it go?
It literally went perfect, as close to perfect as one could have even imagined.
It just seems improbable given that moving parts are always hell.
Yeah. People actually asked after, did you overblow how hard this was, right? And the truth was, practicing for everything as if it could go wrong was the best preparation for making it go right.
It took almost 7 months for the telescope to unfold, calibrate, and reach its orbit 1 million miles from Earth. And because infrared is a form of heat, it also had to get cold, minus 400 degrees. Even the sun's heat would blind the telescope to the faint infrared signals from space.
So we have to block out any shred of that sun by deploying a big sun shield, a big umbrella effectively. There's only one star in the entire universe we'll never see, and it's ours. It's the sun.
Finally, the science could begin.
This is the flight control room. This is where we talk to the telescope. We're telling it, hi there, anything unexpected happened. Send us all the sweet, sweet data that you've been collecting over the last several hours.
Jane Rigby is the Webb's chief scientist. She works at NASA's Space Telescope Science Institute in Baltimore.
The elevator pitch for the Webb telescope was to get the baby pictures of the universe, right? We have delivered exactly what we promised on that topic. We've gone from basically ignorance about what that first billion years of the universe was like to having it in crisp, high definition.
Another Webb mission to examine distant planets to see if any of them have atmospheres like ours, maybe to find one we could live on. But how can a telescope know what's in a distant planet's atmosphere? Turns out, when a planet passes in front of its star, the elements of its atmosphere, oxygen, nitrogen, whatever, block specific bands of light.
And by analyzing how the rainbow changes when the planet is in front of the star, we can tell you what the atmosphere of that planet is like.
The Webb has already studied the atmospheres of dozens of distant planets. It found carbon dioxide and methane on this one, which suggests that it has oceans.
It's such a joy that this telescope is working so well because it was built really well by the engineers.
But not all the Webb headlines have been triumphant. The one in June 2022 didn't sound good at all.
Webb's been hit by a meteorite, made a hole.
Yes.
What was that day like?
Yeah, it was wonderful, you know. So we designed the mirrors to get hit by micrometeorites, you know, small particles, say grain of sand or something like that. But I mean, you're truly talking about one small spot and something 22 feet across, right? The impact of it was really irrelevant. It actually didn't impact science at all.
But there were also some questions about the photos. Was NASA manipulating them? Colorizing them?
That question actually comes up a lot. Is what Webb sees real?
NASA image experts Joe DePasquale and Elisa Pagan can answer the questions about colorizing. They're the ones who do it.
It's our job to be able to translate that light into something that our eyes can see.
As it turns out, there's a lot of light that people can't see, like ultraviolet light, which bees can see, or infrared light, which pit vipers can see. Ultraviolet light travels in very short waves. Infrared waves are much longer, and that's what guides the colorizing process.
We're taking the shortest wavelengths, applying the bluer color, the middle wavelength, that's the green, and then the longest wavelength gets assigned the red. This is what we think is the truest representation of what we could possibly see if we could see an infrared light.
If you're that viper that can see infrared. Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
In just the first year of Webb observations, scientists published over 600 papers based on its discoveries. And according to Scott Willoughby, the telescope has one more little gift for us this Christmas.
When we launched, we never had to correct our own rocket engines. We saved all of that fuel and effectively on day one doubled the launch of the mission from 10 years to 20.
Wait a minute. So you told Congress that this thing would run for 10 years?
That's right.
And now you're saying we get another 10
That's
for
right.
free?
We used zero contingency fuel, and that leads to 10 more years of operations.
So for at least 20 years, scientists around the world will keep peeling back the mysteries of the universe. And the Webb will keep sending back pictures that amaze and amuse us. From the optical quirk known as the question mark, to the galaxy cluster that NASA calls the Christmas tree, and beyond.